Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one we're going to be covering State Machine Behaviours, or SMBs as they're abbreviated to. In Unity, use State Machine Behaviours to handle primarily enemy AI logic. That's what I found the best use, or the most common use of it to be. So I'll be showing you how to set it up, how I've set it up in my game, and then in a future tutorial, when we get to actually modeling a player or an enemy with a bone structure and attacks and movement or whatever, then we'll link that all up with our own one that will build up from scratch. But for the sake of this, I'll cover mine and explain how it works in case you've never used one before. It's very good for handling the logic because what you might do, like what I did when I first started, is I had an update function on my enemy that would check the distance between the enemy and the player, and then if it's in a certain range, we would start moving after the player, and then if it goes out that range, or if it's in an even closer range, then we'll attack. And it was just really bad to do all the logic there. It's much neater and more. It's easier to read and easier to manage if you use state machine behaviors like this. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I want to start by thanking my patrons. Thanks to Michael, Norwegian Viking, Paul Robinson, Phil Baum, and Wesley for their donations this month on Patreon. If anyone else is able to help out and support me in the community, then the link's in the description below. But apart from that, let's get into it. So as I said, I'm going to be using my project for an example. So here I've got an enemy I have modeled and made in Blender. So I'm not going to obviously go into the modeling and the whole process this video, but in Blender over here we've got the enemy that I've made. So that's what he looks like, and then I've set up this bone structure for him. This is just the root bone that moves the entire thing. Well, if I'm in pose mode, it does. So that's if I wanted to actually move that, but for now I don't need that. I just need this for doing the legs, the arms, get the bones, the head, and so on. So as you see, I've got a chasing animation. So if I press Alt-A, I've got this chasing animation. Obviously, it's not like the best thing in the world. Also, it's looping. So if I set the frame to the end, then it would go back to the start. How many frames is that? Well, that's like 73 or something. So now it would like loop. I'll be going into this in a separate video, like how to set up the whole animation process. But there we've got chasing, and I've also got like attack, which because he fires this like fireball thing out of his back, it kind of does that movement to fire it up. And then I've got an idle where he's just kind of almost like breathing, I don't know. So I've got these animations, and here he's in the scene. He's got these animations here, which you can actually preview. So for example, that's what it looks like. We've got the chasing we can see in here. So once you've got those animations, normally you would go into your animator and set up your behavior. So if I go to that enemy, or any of the enemies like that, I have the different animations. So I have idle. Notice how that uses the idle clip. Falling, which I've reused the idle clip. I would just replace that with a falling animation if I made a falling animation, but for now I haven't bothered. Chasing as the chasing. Return also as chasing. It does the same walking kind of animation. I could call that walking basically, but and then attack, obviously I've got my attacking animation. So I've got different states, but I've reused some of the same animation clips because they can look the same. Now, what I've done is I've set up the connections, which you're probably familiar with too. So for idle to falling, that happens when I'm not grounded, and then I come back when I am grounded, and I've got all these different ones set up. So I go to chasing when chasing is true, and then I go from chasing to attacking when attacking is true, or the trigger set to attack, sorry, and so on. Now this is basic stuff that you should already know about. The state machine behavior, which is the focus of this video, are these scripts that are attached to the actual animations. And how it works is these scripts only happen or get called or run or whatever you want to say whilst we're in that particular state. So for example, the idle state, if I open this up, this is the logic, which obviously I'll get into, don't worry about it. This is the logic for the idle state of the enemy. Now if I just have the behavior open, this is the default script, well the behavior script for my enemy. This is where you write the logic on how the enemy works. You also do that in the behaviors, but I'll get into that. So I've used the structure or the layout or the design pattern that Unity themselves use in the 3D game kit. So I've looked into their enemies like 3D game kit, and I've basically gone through it and picked pieces that seem good or like that I want in my game. Because the one thing I'd never coded before, or like wasn't very good at, was always enemy logic and AI. I'm kind of new to that, so I used their project as an example to base my knowledge and like understood the methods and how stuff works. So I've built up my own enemy based on one of theirs, but obviously it's nothing similar. there's no enemy that's like this. You know, I've made it myself. I've removed certain things that they have that I don't need, and I've added extra things that I do need. So basically, we've got I keep saying basically, sorry. Limbo enemy 01, that's just a placeholder name, behavior, and you don't need this iMessage receiver, that's for something else. So at the top, it declares all of the animation variables, because what you might do is you might be used to saying, you know, .set trigger, and then you type in the string. But just like with variables, it's bad to hard code stuff throughout your code. It's better to actually store it at the top, so that in case you, for example, let's say we change the variable name from attacking to, I don't know, some other variable name. Fine, if we change chasing to walking or running, we only have to change it here and it would work everywhere else. The problem is if you had the string everywhere, just like with a variable, you would have to change it everywhere. So that's basically just storing it as an integer, because all the animation related, let me just go find one. All the like set bool, for example, you can pass in an ID, which is the ID at the top. This animator string to hash generates an ID from a string, so it's very useful. It's just a static function on the animator class, so you just call animator.string to hash, pass in your parameter name, so idle, chasing, attack, whatever. So we've got those all stored just for simplicity. This is just logic like, you know, projectile spawning stuff and whatever. And then down here, we've got the onEnable, and what it calls is it calls a scene linked SMB, which is what I'm going to show you now. And it passes in this script type, which is limbo enemy 01 behavior, which I'll change the name of when I get an enemy name or a good name for it. .initialize, which is a function on it, and we pass in, it takes in an animator and a mono behavior. So the animator is the animator on this script, which I store in this controller variable, but you just need to reference the animator on the enemy. And then the mono behavior is this script, and the fact that we can pass in the mono behavior means that we can call functions on here like find, target, start, pursue, and so on. So you write the bare bones functions in your behavior script, but you don't call them here. So for example, start, pursue, I don't call in this script. There's nowhere else it's called. Start, pursue, whatever. This is all called externally, but the logic is here. So for setting the animator is done here, and setting like the animators, the nav mesh is done here too. But what is this scene linked SMB? It's quite complicated. So if we go to that class by pressing F12, it's a class that you'll probably have never seen before, unless like me, you've used the Unity 3D game kit. It's a class that they've built in there, which it's just an extension class. It extends the built-in state machine behavior logic. So if we were to go to here and add our own one in, so like, you know, test idle, I don't know. So if you added a new one of these behaviors, it would look a bit different when you made it. So you would write your logic, and as you see, this is what it looks like. It's got your name, and it derives from state machine behavior, and it gives you all these functions. They're all commented out. You just uncomment the ones you want. So for example, we might want to use this one. And as you see, this function here, whatever code you write in here, is called when the transition starts. So when another animation moves to this one, this gets called, and then on state update is the update frame, but when you're inside that particular animation, and then this gets called when you leave it, and it's all self-explanatory, and it has good like documentation here. But this is quite limited. There's only a few functions, and there's certain data you might need access to that you don't have here. We have reference to state info, the layer index, and the animator. But what if you want reference to your actual enemy? Well, you don't have that reference. You could perhaps reference the animator and then get the component on there, but it's just effort. The best way to do it, which is the way that Unity do it themselves, which I've used, is to basically you don't even have to read it or like learn it if you don't want to, if it's too overwhelming, but obviously you can if you want to. Let's just remove that when it compiles. Okay, so this scene linked SMB that you keep seeing that it's derived from, this takes in the state machine behavior and derives from that. So it's extending it. And we've got all of these extra functions in here you can call. So we've got on start, on state enter, and also here these are commented as well. So you can see when they get called and finished. And you can do all the same stuff that you normally can with the built-in system, but this is extra. So you don't actually need you don't need this, but it's a good idea. Now, I guess the best way is for me to just put it in the description, or you can go and get it from the project themselves. If you don't want to use this, then you don't have to, but I'd highly recommend it because you could build your own wrapper like this, an own system, but it depends how advanced of a programmer you are, whether you are confident in extending built-in systems to be more complicated or more, they got more features and functionality. So when we initialize it, we pass in a mono behavior, which we set here, and then we start the animator. Well, no, we start and we pass the animator. On start is, whoops, where's that? I'm trying to go to. So it takes the animator. It's called on the start function. So if we go over here, all this stuff gets called when I initialize it, which is on enable. So as soon as the enemy is enabled, that'll get called. Now let's go to the actual enemy logic. So on idle, right? Every frame, because it's on the update, because this is just an extension of the built-in update, we find target. We call monoBehavior.find target because monoBehavior references our enemy script, which is of type limbo enemy 01 behavior. So I can call find target on this. If I press F12, it'll take me to it. What does find target do? Well, that's the logic I'm not going to go into now. I've already written it. This will basically, I keep saying basically, I'm annoyed at myself now. People are probably going to get annoyed at that. I find the player, and if we find it, then we set it to this target, and that's I stopped myself there. I stopped myself from saying it. We get the player, and obviously the enemy wants to find the player so it can chase it. And if we go back to the idle, we'll say find the target, and if the target's not null, so if we have found the player, then we call start pursuit. So every frame we're going to check for the player, and as soon as we find him, we're going to start pursuit. Otherwise, we'll just be idle forever. So what does start pursuit do? Well, I'm going to try my best to stop. We get the player, and then we set the boolean to true for the chasing state. So if we go back here, so we set chasing to true. So when we set chasing to true, we'll go up to chasing. And when we're in chasing, what happens? Well, we now use this code instead. We don't just sit there checking for the enemy to start pursuit. We actually do this. Well, what do we do every frame? We still try and find the target to make sure we still have reference to the player. We still need to keep reference to the player. But now that we're chasing, we also need to make sure that the path on the nav mesh is navigable, whatever. We can make sure we can get to the place that we need to get to. And if we can't, we stop pursuit, which resets it and goes back to the start. And we also then have to check if the player is null to stop as well. Assuming that we can get to the player and the player is still in our range, in our vision or whatever, then we get where the player is, we calculate that direction where the player is, and then we check, is the distance from us to the player less than the attack range? So if the player is in the attack range of the enemy, then we trigger attack. What does trigger attack do? It sets the attack trigger, quite simply, and the attack trigger from chasing goes to attack up here. And now we're in attack, and there's some compile errors, which I assume are being fixed right now, apparently. I don't know what I changed. Is it just stuck compiling? It's a bit odd. Oh. Assets test idle. Don't know quite why that's being a problem, because I've actually already deleted it, and obviously it can't be found now because I've deleted it, but nothing sure. Oh, it's fixed. Never mind. Okay, an attack has no logic because how the attack logic works is on the animation. I should be able to. Whoops, I did not mean to open that. Attack. Can I not open the animation? There we go. I have a shoot, which is an event call on that frame, and shoot will call shoot on here. There you go. So this is the logic. We spawn a projectile, we add my damage script. That's the stuff I've added, and then we fire off the projectile. Now, because this animation has an exit time, so if you look, it goes back after after it's done the animation. So it's going to do the complete animation, then it's going to go back to chasing if chasing is true, or it'll go back to idle if chasing is false. So depending on whether the because we could be still
firing at the enemy. But then once we've fired, as the projectile's midair, the enemy might have left our range. So then we'll go back to chasing. And it's all just the logic for attacking, moving closer to the player. If the player gets too far away, then we'll just stop chasing him, and so on. And this whole thing just builds up a web. And we've got logic for returning and even falling. So on falling, when we enter falling, so this gets called just as we enter the falling thing, which gets happened when grounded is false. We add a force. Now the reason I add force 0 is just so the controller disables the nav mesh component, because if you've got the nav mesh component on, you can't leave it. Like, you can't jump, basically. You can't leave the ground. So I need to disable the nav mesh to apply force. That's just a little fiddly thing. But yeah, now if I press play, I'll just show you in action how mine all works. So give it a second to press play. And what I'll do is I'll move the game window like just down here or something, so you can see the animator. So let's go in the scene for which enemy should we go to kill. The one on the end, we'll go for this one. So here's his animator, and here's the game. So he's an idol, and I'm going to get a spell that does a very low damage. I'll just go and hit him with this. So, wrong spell. As the arcane missiles get closer to him, they all miss, of course. I'm gonna stop missing in a second, I'm sure. There we go. So now he's in chasing. And you notice how grounded is true, chasing is true. Then as soon as he gets close to me, it triggers attack. Attack gets fired. And then it still, it keeps going between attack and chasing. Because as soon as it's in a chasing, it can set attack again if I'm in range. But now if I walk away, it just stays in chasing because I'm not in the attack range. As soon as it gets in the attack range, it'll start shooting me again. And if I run away, like properly run away, it'll then go to return if I get far enough away. I've made it very far, I think. Actually, no. It's going to keep chasing me forever because I've made it so that these enemies, if you've aggroed them, if you've attacked them, then they will stay chasing you forever. So, yeah, this guy's not going to stop chasing me now. But he would if he wasn't aggroed, basically. If I just go and get another guy to chase me and don't hit him. See, I've already hit that guy, haven't I? No, I haven't. Okay, he's going to hit me. So let me just pause and say this is the one. I haven't hit him yet. Go to the animator for him. If I run away, he'll just go to chasing now, and I'll get even further away, and now he goes to return, and he keeps doing return until he gets back to his starting position, in which he'll go to idle. So there we go. He goes between all those states, and it all works perfectly. I hope you understood this video and what the purpose of it was, and it lets you build up even more complex enemy systems, and you can reuse certain behaviors if they're the same for all. You know, if you've got different enemies with the similar behaviors, you can reuse them, so that's quite useful. But yeah, I hope you liked the video. If you want more of these, and obviously leave a like and subscribe, it would mean a lot. Leave comments below what you want to see. Anything Unity related would be good. I just want to keep making tutorials, so I'd like people's ideas of what they want to see. And yeah, at some point soon I'll do some modeling and animation for enemies, and then we can build our own system with a state machine behavior for that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and goodbye.